December 1946, Havana, Cuba. The city was alive, palm trees swaying in the warm Caribbean breeze. The city was a playground for the rich and powerful, a place where the party never stopped. But inside the Grand Hotel Nacional, something far more serious was unfolding. Around a polished table in a private suite sat the biggest names in organized crime. Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Vito Genovese, the architects of America's underworld. This wasn't just a meeting, this was history being written in whispers and handshakes. And then the room went silent, the door opened, and in walked Frank Sinatra. The golden boy of American music, dressed to kill, all charm and confidence, and carrying a suitcase stuffed with $2 million in cash. Now, Sinatra wasn't just any guest at this Mafia Summit. He dined with the bosses, laughed with them, and when the night was just right, he sang for them. Luciano, they said, was thrilled to meet him. Sharing roots in the same Sicilian village, they bonded over their heritage as much as their ambitions. Sinatra's presence wasn't just entertainment, it was a statement. At least, that's how the legend goes. You see, with an icon like Sinatra, the line between legend and reality is always blurred. Was he simply a kid from Hoboken who climbed his way to the top? Or was he something more? A man who understood how to navigate both the bright lights of fame and the dark corridors of power. Some secrets were buried alongside their owners, whispered only in back rooms and shadowy corners. But Sinatra's story? It's one of the rare few that refuses to stay buried. But you see, this is where it gets tricky. While Sinatra's denied any involvement with the mob, it does seem he did perform in those mob-run casinos. So why was Frank Sinatra, America's sweetheart, rubbing shoulders with the most dangerous men in the world? And so that's where things get interesting, and we decided to go deeper. It's easy to paint Frank as this pompous, larger-than-life celebrity, swaggering around Hollywood like he owned the place, martini in one hand, cigarette in the other, socializing with mob bosses in a dark room. There was a lot more going on beneath that slick surface. Today, we'll finally be unraveling all the secrets behind this mystery, secrets that have been discussed, debated, and denied for decades. But I'll warn you right now, this won't be easy. We're looking at hundreds of statements, countless witnesses, and decades worth of secrets hidden deep. This is the story of Frank Sinatra's life in the shadows, how a kid from Hoboken ended up serenading mafia bosses in Havana, befriending a president and walking the line between fame and power, building a legacy as much defined by secrets as by music. Hey, and do me a favor, don't be a stunad. Take out that like and hit the subscribe button and drop Inner Circle in the comments. Let's hit 10,000 likes. Loyalty like that does not go unnoticed. Come on, before I gotta make some phone calls.
That's a Sicilian message.
Excuse us, won't you? Certainly. Marco Mangananzo was hurt.
Marco Mangananzo?
Fambino Bombazzo. 2 bullets in the head Thursday. Guido says hi. He hasn't had a chance to talk to you. And from Jersey City, your good friend, Bubani Umbazzo.
What's his
He started his car with your album on, and now he's a highway.
Today, when me and you think of Frank Sinatra, we think of glamour, wealth, and that timeless charm that defined his era. But it wasn't always this way. In fact, he was given quite a rough start in life. Born on December 12, 1915, he was raised in Hoboken, New Jersey. He was born into an immigrant Italian community hit hard by poverty. The place wasn't exactly a slum, but let's just say it was no palace either. His father, Antonino, was a tough Sicilian who came over to New York in 1903, and his mom, Natalina, was North Italian. They were hardworking, but poor, so Frank didn't get any financial head start, that's for sure. The streets were tough, no question, and young Frank knew all about the neighborhood crews, and yeah, the Mafia too. Watching these made men strolling around in their fine tailor-made suits, throwing around stacks of cash and getting the respect of those around them. In a neighborhood like that, you learned quick. You looked out for yourself. and it didn't hurt to have a few well-placed connections. You know, the kind of friends who could step in when things got a little messy. By the time Frank hit his teens, Prohibition was in full swing. Those were wild times. Small-time crooks suddenly turned into big-time operators, raking in huge profits from the bootlegging, especially guys like Lucky Luciano and his crew. Now let me tell you, Lucky wasn't just any gangster or your average crook. For better or for worse, he was a revolutionary, a once-in-a-generation type of guy. He was the modern Mafia Don, the mastermind who changed the whole game, the real Michael Corleone. This guy saw the chaos of Prohibition and thought, there's an opportunity here. A smooth operator, no doubt about it, but what made him so successful was how ruthless he was in executing his vision. Luciano and his crew took the chance Prohibition offered and ran with it. They built one of the most successful bootlegging operations in the entire country under his leadership. He didn't stop there. Oh no, Lucky had bigger plans. He went on to form the Commission, setting up the very framework of the American Cosa Nostra. He laid down the rules, made sure everyone knew their place, a real architect of organized crime in the U.S. And if that wasn't enough, he was instrumental in pushing the mob's expansion into the bright lights of Vegas and the sultry nights of Cuba. A true kingpin, a visionary, and believe me, we'll be diving deeper into his story a little later. Picture this, it's the early 1930s in Hoboken. Illegal speakeasies are hopping, mafia-sourced liquor is flowing, and the latest big band tunes are spilling out into the night from joints that aren't fooling anybody. That's the world young Frank grew up in. Music was everywhere, new sounds spreading across the country as touring bands hit every town they could. Heavily influenced by jazz and big band artists of the time, especially Bing Crosby, it's no wonder the kid got hooked. Now, his folks owned a little tavern, which only fueled that fire in him. Frank was surrounded by music day and night, even getting up to perform himself as a youngster. Little did anyone know, though, that the same mobsters who ran liquor through the streets of Hoboken would soon become crucial figures in Sinatra's career, an offer he can't refuse. So, these were the big leagues for Frank, the real come-up years, with a string of chart-topping hits, sold-out shows with fans swooning and screaming, you better believe it. Then, the war rolls around, and what does Frank do? Becomes the nation's poster boy, serenading Allied troops and cementing his reputation as the voice of America. But like I warned you earlier, things were about to get quite dicey. Frank wasn't just getting to know the music business, he was getting to know the other business. You see, Frank had signed, let's just say, a less-than-ideal contract with the band. Word around town was that there was a clause giving Dorsey a hefty slice, some say up to 43%, of Frank's lifetime earnings. Yeah, you heard that right, lifetime earnings. Talk about a stranglehold. And so, with all this success and attention, Frank rightfully wanted out of this restrictive contract with Tommy Dorsey to go solo. But Dorsey would not budge. So, Frank made a phone call. Enter Willie Moretti, a big shot in the Genovese crime family, at the time was known as the Luciano family, not to mention the cousin of Frank Costello. This was a powerful man to know, and while it's not clear exactly when Moretti began working some of his magic for Sinatra, by the early 1940s it seems, he was indeed pulling in a few favors. All of this is starting to sound familiar, doesn't it? But hold your horses, we're gonna get to that. So where are we? So Frank made a call, and the next thing you know, Moretti is having a little heart-to-heart with Dorsey. No one's exactly sure what happened during that meeting, but let's just say Dorsey suddenly had a change of heart. He let Frank go just like that. And as for that 43% lifetime earnings clause, gone. Frank was now free to do his thing, but now he owed Moretti, and if there's one thing we know, the mob never forgets a favor. Of course, this is all alleged, and no one knows for certain the details of what happened, but the links are all quite solid. But with that aside, Sinatra was now a free man. So, like the video, or you'll have the displeasure of having an angry Luca Brasi pay you a visit. These were the glory days for Sinatra, the pinnacle of his early career. He wasn't just a household name, he was a sensation sweeping the nation. A string of chart-topping hits? Absolutely. Packed venues with fans hanging on every silky note, that was just another night on stage for Frank. Performing for Allied troops, he lifted spirits and cemented his place in the heart of America. It seemed like he could do no wrong. Everything he touched turned to gold, and success followed him like a shadow. But fame has a way of attracting all kinds of attention, some of it from places you'd rather avoid. The mob began to take a keen interest in Frank's rising star, intrigued by his influence and reach. And to be fair, there was little he could do about it. He was a celebrity, and how was he supposed to refuse to talk to or greet or interact with all these different people? They also don't exactly go around with a name card and a list of all their crimes on their suits. But yes, some people do have reputations that precede them, none more than Charles Lucky Luciano. So as his fame soared, so did the stakes. The higher he climbed, the more complex his world became. The next chapter of Frank's life would reveal that the bright lights of fame can cast some very long shadows. The story was far from over, and things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. There's no such thing as good money or bad money. There's just money. Lucky Luciano. As the dust settled from World War II, something else was stirring. Not in Europe, but in the underbelly of New York City. Enter Lucky Luciano, the mob boss who'd done Uncle Sam a favor by keeping the docks safe from sabotage during the war, and got in touch with his connections in the Sicilian Mafia to help with Operation Husky, which is quite a crazy story that we'll have a full documentary on. But anyway, how does the government repay him? Well, they let him out of prison, throwing away the 50-year sentence he was supposed to serve, but with the stipulation that he's to never set foot on American soil ever again. And so, he was deported back to Italy. But for a guy like Luciano, retirement wasn't an option. But how was he meant to run his empire without setting foot in it? Add to that, found himself under strict surveillance by Italian authorities, with every step shadowed, every conversation monitored. Running an empire under such scrutiny was impossible. Luciano wasn't about to let his legacy fade. He needed a new playground, somewhere close enough to pull the strings, but far enough to evade watchful eyes. That place was Cuba. You see, Cuba was more than just a tropical paradise, it was a strategic gold mine. Just a stone's throw from the U.S. mainland, it offered the perfect vantage point to oversee his American operations without violating his deportation terms. Communication lines to New York were short and sweet, allowing Luciano to keep his fingers firmly on the pulse of his criminal enterprises. And so there was no time to lose. After a quick stopover in South America, Luciano made his way to Cuba in October 1946, apparently using a fake passport under the name Salvatore Ralbag. His entry was facilitated by bribing Cuban officials and leveraging connections established by Meyer Lansky, the man who was the key link to the president himself. In Cuba, Luciano found the freedom he craved. The Italian authorities were a world away, and the Cuban officials were more than accommodating, well greased by bribes. With forged documents and a network of loyal associates, he moved like a ghost, invisible to international law enforcement, but also having become a distant memory to the American authorities. They thought they had finally got rid of him, but instead, they might have just given him an unfathomable advantage. He became untouchable. The economic opportunities were too enticing to ignore. Havana was booming, a city alive with the hum of casinos, hotels, and nightclubs. Tourists flocked to its vibrant streets, their wallets open and appetites eager. Luciano, alongside his old associate Meyer Lansky, poured investments into these ventures. The casinos weren't just businesses, they were cash registers that never stopped ringing. And then there was the narcotics trade. Cuba's prime location made it the ideal transshipment point for drugs flowing from Europe and South America into the United States. Controlling this pipeline meant controlling the lifeblood of the underworld economy. Luciano intended to seize that control with both hands. In the sultry heat of Havana, beneath the sway of palm trees and the rhythm of nightlife, Luciano played his greatest game. The island became the heartbeat of his operations, a place where power was brokered over clinking glasses and the shuffle of cards. And as the sun set over the Malecón, Luciano stood at the center of it all, the master of a world he'd crafted from the shadows. In December 1946, in a bold move to reassert his dominance, Luciano organized the infamous Havana Conference. The heavyweights of the Mafia world gathered under one roof, a who's who of organized crime. They discussed everything: drug trafficking, gambling operations, and even the future of Las Vegas. Hosting this summit wasn't just about business, it was a statement. Luciano was back in charge. The boss of bosses was still the one who held the strings. Some of the heavy hitters at this historic meeting were Meyer Lansky, of course, Luciano's right-hand guy, childhood friend, and the brains behind the operation. Then there's Vito Genovese, the acting boss of the Luciano family, while Lucky's out of the picture. But don't let that fool you. Vito wasn't just holding the fort, he was scheming. Word was he wanted Lucky's throne, and this meeting, a perfect chance to push his narcotics agenda and position himself as the top dog. Ambitious? Sure. Dangerous? You bet. Then there was Frank Costello, the influential mobster and political fixer in New York, known as the Prime Minister of the underworld. Costello had the politicians in his pocket and the gambling rackets in his control. A classy guy, but not flashy. He was powerful, and he knew this meeting was about keeping his influence in Lucky's organization locked down. Frank wasn't the muscle, but when he talked, people listened. You also had Albert the Mad Hatter Anastasia, the leader of Murder Incorporated and future boss of what would become the Gambino crime family. One of the most feared men in the business, this guy didn't just handle disputes, he ended them. A symbol of power in the Mafia's muscle operations. Joseph Bananas Bonanno, young, ambitious, and already running his own show as the boss of the Bonanno family, he was seen as a rising star, and being at this meeting, that was his way of showing he was in the big leagues now. Then there was Santo Trafficante Jr., the heir apparent to the Tampa crime family. At the time, he was representing his father, Santo Trafficante Sr., but everyone knew Jr. was the future. And Cuba, that was his playground. He wasn't calling the shots just yet, but he was getting his feet wet in the casino market. Joe Adonis, Luciano's close ally and a heavy hitter in Brooklyn. Adonis had charms and connections, but don't let the slick suits fool you. He was as ruthless as they came. He was all in on the discussions about narcotics and gambling, making sure his interests were covered. And last but not least, Carlo Gambino, aka the Fox. At the time, he was a lieutenant in Anastasia's crew, but everyone could see he was going places. Quiet, calculating, and always playing the long game, Gambino used this meeting to strengthen his alliances and lay the groundwork for what would one day become his empire. These weren't just guys at a table. They were the architects of organized crime as we know it. Each one had their own angle, their own ambition, but together, they were a force. You could feel it in the room: power, greed, and just a little bit of paranoia. Because in their world, alliances were temporary, and trust? That was just a word you used until it wasn't useful anymore. The Havana Conference was not just a meeting, it was a defining moment where power dynamics were realigned, alliances forged, and the future of the Mafia was set in motion. Amidst the high-stakes environment, heated arguments, and power moves was a layer of glamour and legitimacy. Which is where Frank mysteriously enters the world of the Mafia again. Allegedly, of course. So here's how the story goes. Frank was invited to perform at the hotel where all the bosses would be. But that's not the crazy part. Accompanying Frank would be the Fischetti brothers, two of Al Capone's cousins, as well as a suitcase with $2 million in cash. Why, how, who, when? Well, the details are quite vague, but he apparently openly dined with the bosses, especially Luciano, who was a huge fan, and walked around Havana with him. Luciano was thrilled to meet him. They shared roots in the same Sicilian village, a bond that, in their world, was as strong as blood. Picture it: cigar smoke thick in the air, glasses clinking with top-shelf rum, and whispers of grand plans echoing through the marble halls. And there, amidst it all, is Sinatra serenading the bosses with that silky voice. It wasn't just that they were super fans, it's the fact that they had the country's most famous entertainer, the Golden Boy, performing at your casino that was essentially printing money. It basically helped give Mafia venues legitimacy and a head start, allowing them to attract more high-quality entertainers in the future too. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, all of this is alleged and are simply accusations that, quite frankly, we will never truly know, and no one's gonna come out and just confirm it. but we can put two and two together. So here's what we know for certain. Cuba at the time was a hotspot for the American upper class. It was the place to be, and so it does make sense that Sinatra would fly there quite regularly. And if the boss of bosses invites you to dinner, what can you say? It's important to note that Sinatra claimed he was unaware of the true nature of the gathering, thinking he was just there to perform at a new establishment. Again, this is something people will debate and speculate about for years to come. But I want to know what you think. Comment it quickly below, and let's continue to the most chaotic part of Frank's life.
This program is brought to you by Don Cortado. Power doesn't shout. It arrives precisely when it means to. Meet Power Brew, a balanced medium roast with rich coffee flavor, elevated by a subtle, earthy finish. Inside, a disciplined trio does its work. Lion's mane to sharpen focus, and chaga, rich in natural antioxidants for quiet resilience, and a smooth, grounded finish. A unique, satisfying cup that supports steady energy and wellness. No jitters, no crash. For the plan, for the pressure, for the long game. Keep your edge. Don Cortado, Power Brew. Make your move. For a limited time, all Culture Mafia members will receive an extra 10% off, as well as free express shipping. But hurry, this is a very limited run. And now let's get back to the film. Ciao.
Basically, I'm for anything that gets you through the night, be it prayer, tranquilizers, or a bottle of Jack Daniels. Frank Sinatra. After World War II wrapped up, the United States was booming like never before, and so was Frank Sinatra's career. Old Blue Eyes was on top of the world, earning nearly $100,000 a week. That's about $1.4 million today. For a guy who'd just been a rising star a few years back, Sinatra seemed untouchable. But as the wise would tell you, even the brightest stars can dim if you don't keep shining. Just like the criminal underworld, the world of entertainment is notoriously fickle. As the late 1940s rolled in, Sinatra's chart-topping hits began to slip, and the packed houses that once loved every performance started to thin out. The decline in show attendance mirrored the unpredictable nature of both fame and fortune. Sinatra, who had once been the hottest ticket in town, found himself facing the same volatility that seasoned mobsters knew all too well. With his career hitting a rough patch, Frank had to navigate these turbulent waters, relying not just on his talent, but also on the connections and savvy moves that kept him afloat. Hollywood wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for Sinatra anymore. Opportunities were drying up, and our friend Frankie was at a loss for his next move. That's when Las Vegas came calling, a city buzzing with lights, gambling, and believe it or not, the same kind of connections that could get you back on top. Since the end of the war, the Mafia had been pouring their investments into Vegas, much like they had in Cuba before. It was a prime spot for the booming gambling industry, a perfect place to rake in big money and, let's be honest, launder some of that illicit cash from the East. Leaders like Siegel from the Syndicate and Meyer Lansky were spearheading this expansion, turning Vegas into the new playground for organized crime. Frank Sinatra arrived in Vegas during this early boom period, a bit down on his luck but hungry for new opportunities. Little did he know that this move was laying the groundwork for his resurgence and pioneering the idea of the celebrity residency that would define his later glorious returns to the desert city. By 1953, Frankie had his first gig at the Sands Hotel and Casino, a place that would go down in history not just for its glitzy performances, but also for its deep mafia ties, thanks to Meyer Lansky's investments. During his time at the Sands, Sinatra wasn't just performing for the high rollers and tourists. Backstage and on the casino floor, he was rubbing shoulders with some of the most notorious made men in the game. Picture this, Frank sharing a drink with Carlo Gambino, posing for photos with him, and deepening his bonds with Sam Giancana, a key mafia player from Chicago who loved the Vegas scene. These weren't just casual acquaintances, they were strategic friendships built on shared Sicilian heritage and mutual respect. For Frankie, some say it wasn't just about the music, it was about the camaraderie, the sense of power, and the prestige that came with having influential mafia figures in his circle. These connections provided him with the support he needed to navigate his career slump, offering both financial backing and protection. In return, Sinatra lent his star power to legitimize and glamorize the Mafia's Vegas operations, drawing in crowds and adding a touch of class to their establishments. This symbiotic relationship wasn't just a one-way street. It was a delicate balance of power and influence, a dance between maintaining his public image and navigating the complexities of his private connections. As Sinatra continued to perform and invest in Las Vegas, his ties with the Mafia only deepened, embedding him further into their network. This period marked a pivotal moment in his career where music, power, and the underworld collided, shaping the trajectory of both his life and the evolution of Las Vegas itself. The best revenge is massive success. Frank Sinatra. Whether through the blessings gained by spending time with and doing favors for the Mafia during his 1950s Vegas stint, his slumped career was soon to take a turn. This was a golden age for Hollywood. Being in the right film at the right time would change your career trajectory. Whether that meant launching you from an unknown into a megastar, or helping to revive careers of those who thought to be past their prime. But hey, in Hollywood, it's all about being in the right place at the right time. One moment you're on top of the world, and next you're scrambling to find your next big break. That's exactly what happened to our boy Frank. Enter From Here to Eternity, a film everyone in the business knew had blockbuster potential. Frankie caught wind of it through the grapevine, his ears perked up. He was itching to land a role, convinced this was his ticket back to the stars. Frankie was all in, chasing the part with the fervor of a man desperate to reclaim his throne. He put his heart and soul into securing the role, believing it was his golden opportunity to shine again. But life, as it often does, has other plans. Instead of Frank, another young buck snagged the gig, leaving him with nothing but frustration and a bruised ego. Now here's where the story takes a twist. While Frank might have been nursing his disappointment, his connections with the Mafia weren't just for show. Remember those favors he did for his mob friends in Vegas? Yeah, well, it was time to cash them in. Rumor has it that the actor originally cast received a little call from some friends of ours. A certain amount of pressure was applied, the kind that you don't easily forget, and just before shooting was set to start, the actor pulled out. And guess who stepped right into the spotlight? Yep, you got it, none other than old Blue Eyes Frank Sinatra himself. This might sound familiar to some of you, and that's because it is, and we'll get into it in a second. But what this rumor implies is this sort of delicate dance between fame and shadow wasn't just a one-time affair in Frank's life. It set the stage for Sinatra's glorious comeback, intertwining his legacy with the underworld in ways that added layers of mystery and intrigue to his already legendary status. This might sound familiar to some of you, and that's because it is. Johnny Fontane, the famous Godfather character desperate for the helping hand of Don Corleone, is almost certainly based on Frank. In the movie, a little artistic license is used portraying the threat when, instead of a phone call, the director gets a certain horse's head as his morning surprise in an attempt to persuade him to recast the role due to be played by Fontane. The sequence of events is otherwise pretty spot on and was enough to incense Frank upon its release. But if you thought the most powerful name in Frank's phone book was the boss of bosses, well, think again. He seemed so happy to be around Frank, felt at home. It was almost like this polished guy was getting a chance to be naughty. Sands Casino assistant manager Walters on President Kennedy and Frank. Now look, while it's easy to paint Frank as this pompous, larger-than-life celebrity swaggering around Hollywood like he owned the place, martini in one hand, cigarette in the other, socializing with mob bosses in a dark room, there was a lot more going on beneath that slick surface. Sure, he loved the attention and the glamour, but Frank wasn't just some self-absorbed superstar. The guy had depth, and believe it or not, he had a serious side that most people didn't get to see. You see, Frank genuinely cared about people, especially ones who got a raw deal. He knew what it was like to be judged, to feel like you're on the outside looking in. That's why he couldn't stand the racism and prejudice he saw around him, and he wasn't afraid to call it out. This wasn't some PR stunt like we see today. For him, he actually wanted to make a difference. And sure, people talk about his ego, his temper, his whole do-it-my-way attitude. But to him, all that fame meant something more than just a big name on a marquee. Frank saw it as power to shake things up, power to stand up for people, power to put himself on the line when it counted. Yeah, he liked being the guy everyone looked up to, but he also understood that being up there came with responsibility. You see, Frank grew up in Hoboken, where the streets were rough and the folks were rougher. Sinatra's experience and his mother Natalina's influence grounded him in the real struggles faced by working-class Americans. Natalina's activism aimed at improving the lives of their neighbors left an indelible mark on him. Her efforts instilled in Sinatra an empathy that later inspired him to speak out against discrimination and to advocate for civil rights. His fame, in his view, wasn't just an opportunity for personal gain, but a powerful tool to change societal injustices. Being Italian-American back then was not easy, similar to other minorities today. So Sinatra's experiences with racism, both as an Italian-American and as a witness to the systemic prejudice against Black Americans, fueled his distaste for the status quo. This disdain for inequality surfaced not only in his music, but also in his actions. Sinatra stood up for fellow artists and civil rights causes, particularly during a time when speaking out was risky and controversial. His support for causes like the civil rights movement highlighted his willingness to use his influence beyond the entertainment industry. Building on his passion for social change, Frank got deeper into party politics in the 1950s. By then, he wasn't just any star, he was the star, with enough star power to form a friendship with none other than Senator John F. Kennedy. And this wasn't just some handshake and a photo op, no, Frank and JFK were close, even partied together a few times, and Frank put his whole heart into Kennedy's campaign. He rallied support, organized a massive gala, and threw a legendary celebration when JFK won. Sinatra saw Kennedy as a kindred spirit, someone young, ambitious, and ready to shake things up. But here's the thing, Frank had skeletons in his closet, and one of those was his connection to the mob. That was the other side of Sinatra, and so his alleged mob ties would come to haunt him. Kennedy's team knew this, and as JFK's career advanced, those ties became too risky. So after winning the presidency, JFK began to put some distance between himself and Frank, especially since RFK had put the Mafia as a key priority to dismantle. The real sting came in 1961. Kennedy was supposed to stay with Frank at his California mansion, a huge honor, and Frank had gone all out, even building a helipad for the visit. But at the last minute, JFK's team pulled the plug, and Kennedy stayed with Bing Crosby instead. Frank was livid. Heartbroken and humiliated, he grabbed a sledgehammer and stormed to the helipad he just built, smashing it in frustration. It was a harsh lesson in politics for Frank. He should have known, though, that politics can be as fickle as show business. Just like in show business, you could be riding high in April and shot down in May. It was a bitter pill, and one he wouldn't forget. But that's Frank. He played the game his way, even when it didn't always go as planned. After his role in From Here to Eternity, Frank's career took off like a rocket again. Turns out a little help from his mob connections went a long way. Suddenly, he had a new recording contract, fresh hits on the charts, and a string of sold-out shows. The 1950s pretty much became the Frank Sinatra decade. During this time, he'd frequently fly out to Vegas not just to perform, but to catch up with old mob buddies, throw down some bets, and enjoy the nightlife. But it wasn't just for fun. Frank had real skin in the game. He owned a 9% share in the Sands Hotel, one of the hottest spots on the Strip, and he was also the principal license holder for the Cal Neva Lodge, a casino right on the Nevada-California border. Frank wasn't just Vegas royalty, he had a piece of the kingdom. But then came the slip-up with Sam Giancana. Now, Giancana was high on the FBI's watch list, and by law, he was banned from any casino. But Frank, he wasn't about to turn away a friend. When Sam showed up at Cal Neva, Frank let him in, and the authorities came down on him hard. The feds stripped Frank of his license, and it was a massive hit to his reputation and his business interests. But Frank was about to get hit by an even bigger freight train. December 8, 1963. He gets a call that would chill anyone to the bone. Someone had kidnapped his son, Frank Jr. Jr. was dining with friends at the Harvey's Lake Tahoe restaurant when two men, James Jimmy Blake and Anthony Tony Ferrara, forcibly abducted him, a group of wannabe wise guys looking for a fast payday. That's the dark side of the fame game. When you're as big as Sinatra, you're a target, and people start using your family as leverage. Frank was distraught. Now, he could have dialed up any number of people for help. He had the cops, the Kennedys, and a whole network of high rollers in his corner. But guess whose number Frank dialed first? Allegedly, mob boss Sam Giancana, one of the country's most powerful organized crime leaders. However, the official story goes that he received offers from assistance from Attorney General Robert Kennedy and Sam Giancana. He declined and instead accepted aid from the FBI. The kidnappers had a list of instructions, and Frank followed them to the letter. They told him to use only payphones, no funny business, and he stuck to it, scrambling across town to drop ransom money on demand. And he didn't waste a second gathering the cash, around $240,000 back then, but today, that's close to $2.4 million. Frank didn't care about the money. He'd pay anything to see his son safe. Thankfully, after he handed over the cash, the kidnappers kept their word, and Junior was released, shaken but unharmed. The whole thing had Frank rattled to his core. He'd seen a lot of rough stuff in his day, but this, going after his family, was a low blow he wasn't ready for. It was a reminder that no matter how high you climb, the stakes only get bigger and the risks hit closer to home. Chapter 8: The Final Bow. By the 1970s, Sinatra had semi-retired but couldn't stay away from the spotlight for long. He returned to the stage with legendary performances, proving he still had the magic. As the decades rolled on, his influence only grew, with honors and accolades cementing his status as a cultural icon. Behind the scenes, his connection to politics and alleged ties to organized crime remained subjects of fascination and speculation, adding layers to his mystique. In his later years, Sinatra faced declining health, enduring heart problems and dementia. Despite this, his spirit remained unshaken, and his music continued to touch millions. By the time May 14, 1998 rolled around, Frank Sinatra had seen it all. From the smoky bars of Hoboken to the glitz of Vegas, from the roar of sold-out arenas to the intimate hush of a studio booth, he lived a life most could only dream of. By then, he was 82, his health fading. But that voice and mystique endured, woven into the fabric of American culture. In a room at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, Old Blue Eyes took his final bow, succumbing to a heart attack. Outside, fans held candles and sang My Way into the night. Inside, the family said their goodbyes to the man who defined an era, leaving behind a legacy that would resonate for generations to come. The world lost a towering presence, a man whose resilience, talent, and mystique had carried him from tragedy to triumph and left an enduring mark on music and popular culture. Sinatra's story isn't just about music or fame. It's about survival, loyalty, and ambition. It's about knowing which hands to shake and which deals to make. Whether the rumors are fact or fiction, one thing is certain: Sinatra had the charm to captivate millions and the connections to stay untouchable. He proved that talent could open doors, but it was his resilience and cunning that kept him standing, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. In the end, Old Blue Eyes didn't just live the American dream, he redefined it, blurring the lines between legend and reality. And maybe that's the most Sinatra thing of all, to leave us wondering where the man ended and the myth began. So, as the curtain falls on this tale, we're left with one final question. Was Sinatra the puppet, the puppeteer, or a bit of both? Well, that's for you to decide. After all, in the world of Frank Sinatra, nothing is ever as it seems. But what's certain is that he did it his way. Thank you for watching, and now if you've enjoyed this video, wait till you see how this one ends.